Imagine stepping into a really dense, foggy valley in the early hours of a crisp autumn morning.
Oh, yeah. Setting the scene.
Right, so you're there, and you're surrounded by 160,000 heavily armed men.
Which is just a staggering number of people for that era.
It's massive,
Yeah.
and the tension in the air is, I mean, it's so thick you could cut it with the samurai's blade.
Yeah, you could probably feel it in your chest.
Exactly. And these massive armies, they represent the violent culmination of a century of nonstop bloody civil war.
A literal 100 years of chaos.
Right. They have spent decades maneuvering, betraying each other, hoarding these revolutionary new weapons, and it's all leading up to this single moment.
It all comes down to this one valley.
And here's the crazy part, when the fog finally lifts, this battle doesn't drag on for months or even days.
No, not at all.
The fate of an entire nation, like the trajectory of its culture, and the absolute rule for the next 2.5 centuries is decided in exactly 2 hours.
Yeah, 2 hours. It is one of the most stunningly abrupt conclusions to a prolonged period of chaos in recorded history.
It really is.
I mean, the sheer velocity of that resolution, it just defies everything we usually expect from sweeping historical shifts, you know?
It totally does, and that is why we are here. Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, our mission is to untangle one of the most complex, dramatic, and just pivotal eras in global history.
It's a big one today.
Oh, it's huge. We are diving into the Sengoku period, or the Warring States period in Japan, which basically tore the country apart throughout the 15th and 16th centuries.
Tore it completely to shreds.
Yeah. We've got this massive stack of historical documents, diaries, encyclopedic entries on the table today.
So many primary sources for this one.
We are going to explore the terrifying chaos of this era, the introduction of a disruptive technology that changed the mechanics of war overnight, and the 3 men who finally forced this broken country back together.
The 3 great unifiers.
Right. Oda Nobunaga, Toyotomi Hideyoshi, and Tokugawa Ieyasu. So, to really get why these 3 guys are such a big deal, we need to understand what they were dealing with, right?
Oh, absolutely. To appreciate the monumental task those 3 men faced, we first have to establish the utter state of collapse that Japan was experiencing at the time.
Like, how bad was it?
Well, by the mid-1400s, the de facto central government, the Ashikaga shogunate, was essentially a hollow shell.
The hollow shell, okay.
Yeah, I mean, they had the fancy titles, they had the prestige, but they had completely lost the ability to project actual power or enforce the law outside the immediate vicinity of Kyoto.
Wow. So if I'm, just a regular person living in a province 100 miles away, the central government is basically just a rumor to me at this point.
Pretty much, yeah. This is entirely irrelevant to your daily life.
That's wild.
And because the center could no longer enforce the rules, this phenomenon took hold called Gekukujo.
Gekukujo, did I say that right?
You did. It translates roughly to the lower overcomes the higher.
Okay, so like a total reversal of the food chain.
Exactly. The traditional master-servant relationships between lords and their vassals totally broke down.
Wow.
Like a local samurai who realized his regional lord was weak,
Yeah.
he wouldn't just complain about it or petition the government.
Right, because there's no government to petition.
Exactly. He would gather a few loyal men, assassinate the lord, take the castle, and just declare himself the new ruler.
Oh, man. Just a complete suspension of the social contract.
Total anarchy.
It sounds like a terrifying time to be alive, especially if you were just, an average person trying to farm your land.
Oh, the suffering of the common people was immense. I mean, constant warfare meant armies were constantly marching through farmlands.
Stealing crops, I imagine.
Stealing crops, burning villages, just total devastation.
Yeah.
But the peasants, they didn't just passively accept this. We actually see the rise of these massive revolts, known as the Iko-Iki.
Iko-Iki. Okay, who were they?
These were coalitions of furious peasants, militant Buddhist monks, and disenfranchised local samurai who basically banded together to overthrow their regional oppressors.
Wait, farmers and monks teaming up with rogue samurai?
Yeah, and they were shockingly successful.
Really?
Yeah. Entire provinces like Katagaga, they completely expelled the traditional samurai lords and established their own autonomous self-governing zones for decades.
Wait, they kicked out the samurai and ran it themselves for decades.
Yeah, for a very long time.
That is insane. I mean, put yourself in the shoes of a traditional nobleman at the time, right? You've been raised to believe you have a divine right to rule.
Right.
And suddenly a coalition of farmers and monks just kicks down your gates and runs you out of your own province.
It's a total inversion of the world order.
Exactly. But this brings up a massive question for me.
Yeah, what's that?
If the country is fractured into hundreds of these warring factions and autonomous zones, how does anyone possibly consolidate it? Like, you'd need some kind of overwhelming advantage to pull that off.
You would. You need a disruptor,
Right.
something that completely rewrites the rules of engagement. And that disruption, it actually arrived on the shores of a small southern island called Tanegashima
Uh-huh.
in 1543.
1543, Tanegashima. This is the Portuguese, right?
Yes, the Portuguese merchants. They're the first Europeans to ever set foot in Japan.
Wow.
But more importantly, it's the cargo they brought with them.
Which was?
The matchlock gun, specifically the arquebus.
Ah, okay. The guns.
And the Japanese, they actually began calling these weapons Tanegashima, just naming them after the island itself.
That makes sense. I mean, I look at this moment like a massive technological disruption in a modern industry, but obviously with life or death stakes, you know?
Oh, for sure.
Think about a company today that just ignores artificial intelligence or the internet back in the day.
They're obsolete overnight.
Right. If you were a warlord in 1543 and you didn't immediately restructure your entire military and economy around this new device, you were going to be wiped off the map by the neighboring lord who did.
That is exactly what happened. Adapt or die.
But okay, I want to pause here for a second, because I've actually seen replicas of these early matchlocks in museums, and they are incredibly clunky.
Oh, very clunky.
Like, you have to pour powder down the barrel, drop a lead ball in, pack it down, put powder in a little pan, and then use a smoldering piece of rope, the match, to ignite it.
Yeah, the slow match. It takes forever.
Right, it takes forever. Meanwhile, Japanese archers using the traditional Yumi bow, they were lethal. They were fast, they were highly mobile.
Very true.
So why was this slow, cumbersome gun such a massive game changer? It seems like a downgrade in speed.
Well, that is the crucial question. Because the advantage of the matchlock wasn't its speed, and it certainly wasn't its accuracy.
Okay, then what was it?
The advantage was the drastically lower barrier to entry for lethal force.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Right, consider the mechanics of the Yumi. It's an asymmetrical longbow, often over 6 feet tall, with an incredibly heavy draw weight.
So you have to be pretty strong just to pull it back.
Exactly. To be effective in combat with a Yumi, a samurai had to train for years, decades, really. They're developing specific muscle groups, intuitive spatial awareness, and often they're doing this while riding a horse.
So it's basically a lifetime commitment to a martial art.
Yes, precisely.
Yeah.
You cannot mass-produce a skilled archer.
Right, right.
Now, contrast that with the matchlock. To teach a drafted farmer how to load the powder, keep the match lit, point the barrel in the general direction of the enemy, and pull the trigger,
Yeah.
it takes maybe 2 to 3 weeks of basic drilling.
2 to 3 weeks. Wow.
That's it.
So you are taking a peasant who was like planting rice last month and suddenly making him capable of killing a samurai who has trained every single day for 20 years.
Exactly. It democratizes lethality.
Democratizes lethality. I like that phrase.
Yeah, it shifted the entire paradigm from a war of individual skill to a war of industrial scale.
Industrial scale. Meaning you just need lots of guys with guns.
Yes, exactly. To win, warlords no longer just needed elite samurai. They needed massive standing armies of eshigaru.
Ashigaru.
Yes, the foot soldiers drawn from the peasantry. They needed huge lines of them holding matchlocks.
Okay, but fielding an army of thousands of gun-toting foot soldiers, that requires an infrastructure that a small-time local lord simply doesn't have. Right?
Oh, definitely not. And that is exactly why power began to rapidly consolidate.
So the small guys just got swallowed up.
Right. Small lords couldn't compete in this new numbers game. You needed vast agricultural territories just to feed a standing army.
That makes sense.
And you needed a wildly complex logistical network to supply the weapons. The matchlock supply chain was an absolute nightmare.
Because, I mean, you can't just make gunpowder out of thin air.
No, you cannot. Gunpowder requires 3 things: charcoal, sulfur, and potassium nitrate, which is also known as saltpeter.
Okay, charcoal, sulfur, saltpeter.
Right. Now, Japan had plenty of charcoal, and being volcanic, they had plenty of sulfur.
Sure.
But they had virtually 0 domestic sources of potassium nitrate.
Wait, none?
It simply wasn't found in their soil in meaningful quantities at the time.
Oh, wow.
Furthermore, they needed massive amounts of imported lead to cast all those bullets.
So to run a domestic war, to fight your own neighbors, you are entirely dependent on international trade. If your supply of imported saltpeter gets cut off by someone else, your entire army just becomes useless guys holding metal tubes.
You're suddenly tied to the global economy. Warlords had to secure friendly relations with Portuguese merchants.
Because they had the ships.
Yes. And the warlords had to control deep-water ports to ensure the flow of these raw materials from China and Southeast Asia.
Man, this massive logistical hurdle, it perfectly sets the stage for our first great unifier.
It really does.
Because while everyone else was probably just trying to figure out how to buy a few guns, one man realized he needed to own the entire supply chain.
Yeah.
And that man was Oda Nobunaga.
Oda Nobunaga. Born in 1534 in Owari province.
Hmm.
He's a figure who casts a massive, incredibly intimidating shadow over Japanese history. He is often referred to as the Demon Daimyo.
The Demon Daimyo, which is a terrifying nickname. Though it's fascinating when you read the early accounts because he didn't start out as this terrifying warlord, right?
No, he doesn't.
The sources say that in his youth, he was actually known as the Fool of Owari.
Yes, the Fool of Owari.
Like he would dress bizarrely, wear foreign clothes, and just hang out with the commoners in town, which I imagine was deeply scandalous for a young nobleman back then.
Oh, his eccentricity completely horrified his traditional retainers. They thought he was out of his mind.
But there was a method to the madness, right?
There absolutely was. That behavior actually gave him a significant advantage.
How so?
Well, by interacting with the commoners and roaming his province freely, he understood the landscape, the people, and the local economy in a way that lords isolated in their fancy castles never did.
Oh, that makes a ton of sense. He actually knew his own territory.
Exactly. He had boots on the ground. And when his father died in 1551, any illusion of him being a harmless fool vanished instantly.
The mask came off.
Completely. He brutally eliminated all opposition within his own Oda clan.
His own family.
Yes, he forced family members who opposed him to commit suicide, and he crushed rival factions to consolidate total control of Owari by 1559.
Wow. So he was not playing by the old samurai rules of honor at all?
Not even a little bit. He actually adopted a new seal for his official documents, Tenka Fubu.
Tenka Fubu. What does that mean?
It translates roughly to spreading military power throughout the world.
Oh, man. That is not a subtle message.
No, it was a declaration of intent. He wasn't looking for a peace treaty. He was going to force the country into submission through absolute, terrifying military dominance.
And the engine for that dominance was his mastery of the matchlock.
Exactly. The Kunitomo Toppoki, which is a local historical record, it notes that Nobunaga recognized the potential of these weapons as early as 1549.
Wait, 1549, that's just 6 years after they landed in Japan.
Right, he was way ahead of the curve. By 1550, he had already appointed a man to oversee a dedicated production facility and commissioned 500 guns.
500 guns in 1550. That is visionary.
It really is. Yeah. But his real genius wasn't just buying them. It was figuring out how to overcome their massive tactical flaw on the battlefield.
Right, right. Going back to the reload time we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Because if I'm a gunner and I fire my one shot, a charging cavalry unit is going to cover the distance and cut me down way before I can pour the powder for my second shot.
They'll be on you in seconds.
So how do you survive that?
You survive it by completely reinventing battlefield geometry.
Okay, I like the sound of that. How did he do it?
Nobunaga implemented a tactic known as continuous or staggered firing.
Staggered firing.
Yes. The most famous execution of this was at the Battle of Nagashino in 1575.
Nagashino, okay.
He was facing the Takeda clan, who had arguably the most feared cavalry in all of Japan.
So the worst possible matchup for a slow reloading gunner.
Exactly. So Nobunaga deployed 10,000 Ashigaru gunners, and he placed them behind sturdy wooden palisades to break the cavalry's momentum.
So like a physical barrier to buy time.
A barrier, yes, but paired with a revolutionary system. He arranged his gunners in ranks, typically described as 3 deep.
3 rows of guys with guns.
Right. The front row would step up to the palisade, aim, and fire a massive synchronized volley.
Boom.
But instead of fumbling with their powder flasks right there while getting charged by horses, they immediately stepped backward.
Ooh.
The second row instantly stepped into the gap and fired their volley.
Wow.
Then they stepped back, and the third row fired. And by the time the third row had discharged their weapons, the first row had finished reloading in the back and was stepping back up to the front.
It's a loop. It turns a slow-firing weapon into a continuous, unbroken storm of lead.
Exactly. The psychological terror of that must have been absolutely paralyzing. The Takeda cavalry, who were expecting the usual lull in fire, they just charged straight into a meat grinder.
That is brilliant.
And it's worth noting that while Nagashino is the famous example, our sources indicate Nobunaga actually pioneered this continuous fire tactic 21 years earlier,
Really? What?
at the Battle of Meraki Castle in 1554.
1554. So he was decades ahead of his contemporaries in grasping the mechanics of industrialized warfare.
Decades ahead.
But, even with continuous fire, you still have to protect those gunners if the enemy infantry somehow manages to get close. Because gunners are vulnerable. They aren't wearing heavy samurai armor, right?
Right, they need mobility to reload,
Hmm.
which leads to his second massive innovation,
Okay, what's that?
the Yorobusuma, or the spear wall.
The spear wall.
Yes. During this era, the standard length for an infantry spear was roughly 12 feet.
Which seems pretty long already.
It is. But Nobunaga watched his men in training and realized that 12 feet just wasn't enough to keep a charging enemy safely away from his gunners.
Okay.
So he ordered all the spears in his army to be lengthened to anywhere from 18 to 21 feet.
21 feet. That completely changes the physics of the weapon. You can't, dynamically thrust and parry with a 21-foot pole.
You don't try to.
Yeah.
The mechanics of the Yorobusuma relied entirely on collective action. A line of men would hold these massive pikes upright, and on command they would swing them down in unison.
Oh, wow.
They weren't aiming for individual targets. They were creating a physical, impenetrable wall of descending wood and steel blades.
It's like a porcupine.
Exactly. It created a buffer zone that enemy troops simply could not push through, keeping the gunners safely insulated behind the line.
It's a beautifully brutal, self-sustaining military ecosystem. The pikes protect the guns, and the guns destroy the enemy.
It was incredibly effective.
But, to keep this massive machine running, Nobunaga couldn't just be a tactician on the battlefield. He had to be like a ruthless CEO of a massive corporation.
Oh, he absolutely was. He took absolute control of the supply chain.
Right, the logistics we mentioned earlier.
He marched on and seized Sakai.
What's Sakai?
It was the wealthiest international port city in Japan. Seizing it gave him direct access to foreign trade.
Smart.
He brought all the major merchants and arms dealers under his direct authority. He essentially created what we would recognize today as a military-industrial complex.
And what about that saltpeter shortage? How did he guarantee he'd have the explosives?
Through a deeply pragmatic alliance with the Jesuit missionaries.
The missionaries, how does that work?
Well, Nobunaga showed very little personal interest in Christian theology.
Right.
But he understood the geopolitical reality. The Portuguese merchants, the guys who controlled the ships, bringing in the saltpeter and lead, they relied heavily on the Jesuits to act as their diplomats and translators in Japan.
So the priests are the middlemen.
Yes. By offering the Jesuits physical protection, land to build churches, and permission to preach, Nobunaga essentially bought the loyalty of the Portuguese trade fleet.
That is just brilliant leverage. He solved his supply chain problem by playing nice with the priests.
Exactly. He secured a near monopoly on the raw materials needed to conquer Japan.
Unbelievable. And didn't he also improve the technology itself? Because I've read that early European guns were really prone to exploding if there was a flaw in the cast iron.
Yes, they were. And here is where Japanese metallurgy gave him a distinct edge.
Okay.
Japanese swordsmiths were absolute masters of folding steel. It's a process that distributes the carbon evenly and removes microscopic impurities or slag.
Right, the famous katana folding technique.
Exactly. When Nobunaga smiths applied those specific sword-making techniques to forge gun barrels, instead of just casting them,
Oh, I see.
the result was a barrel that could withstand significantly higher internal chamber pressure than European cast barrels.
Which means you can pack in more powder.
More powder means higher muzzle velocity, better accuracy, and the ability to punch straight through thick samurai armor.
So his forces were fielding some of the most advanced firearms on the planet at that time.
Without a doubt.
So let's look at the scoreboard. He has the technology, he's got the supply chain, the tactics, and just the absolute ruthlessness to use it all.
He had it all.
He systematically crushes his rivals, he marches into Kyoto, and by 1582, he controls 20 provinces.
Over a third of the country.
He is standing on the precipice of total national unification. The long nightmare of the Sengoku period is finally ending.
It seemed inevitable.
And then the unthinkable happens.
Yes. At the absolute zenith of his power, Oda Nobunaga is betrayed.
But not by a rival warlord.
No. He is betrayed by one of his most trusted top generals, a man named Akechi Mitsuhide.
Akechi Mitsuhide. Okay, how does this go down?
In June of 1582, Nobunaga was resting at the Honnoji Temple in Kyoto. He only had a very small personal guard with him.
Because he felt safe.
Right. He was actually expecting Mitsuhide's army to just march past on their way to the front lines to fight another clan.
Right.
But instead, Mitsuhide ordered his troops to surround the temple and attack.
The betrayal is just staggering. I mean, Nobunaga built this invincible war machine, and he gets taken out while resting in a temple.
It was a massive shock.
And facing thousands of his own soldiers, he knew there was no escape, right?
He did. The sources say he retreated to the inner rooms of the temple, set the building on fire, and committed seppuku ritual suicide.
Whoa.
He did it so that his enemies couldn't even claim the glory of taking his head.
That is intense. But it fits him perfectly. The Demon King is dead.
He is dead. And the power vacuum created by that fire was absolute.
I can imagine. So what happens to the guy who betrayed him? Mitsuhide.
Mitsuhide tried to seize control of Nobunaga's massive empire, obviously. But his reign lasted barely over a week.
Weak.
Yeah, it actually gave rise to a famous Japanese phrase, Mikatenka, which means a 3-day reign.
Wow, so he failed miserably.
He couldn't hold the power because another one of Nobunaga's generals was moving with terrifying speed to crush him.
And this transition is where the story pivots from military industrialization to something much more psychological, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the man who avenges Nobunaga and seizes the empire isn't a nobleman with a long pedigree. It's a man who started at the very bottom of the dirt.
Toyotomi Hideyoshi.
Hideyoshi.
His rise is arguably the most remarkable social mobility story in Japanese history.
I would agree.
I mean, he was born in 1537 in Wari province to a family of peasant farmers. His father occasionally served as a lowly foot soldier, but they were peasants.
Wow.
He was originally named Yoshimaru, and he had absolutely no surname because peasants weren't allowed to have surnames.
Just a single name.
Right. Yet this peasant would rise to become the Kampaku, the imperial regent, and the Daijo Daijin, the chancellor of the realm.
Wait, hold on. He became the chancellor, but he didn't become the shogun. I thought shogun was the top spot.
It's a great question. He was actually barred from the title of shogun.
Why?
By strict tradition, the shogun had to prove direct lineage from the ancient Minamoto clan.
And a peasant obviously can't do that.
Right, Hideyoshi couldn't fake a pedigree quite that well, so he took a different route.
What did he do?
He arranged to be officially adopted by a high-ranking court noble of the Fujiwara clan.
Oh, wow.
Which made him eligible for the civilian roles of regent and chancellor. And interestingly, those titles technically outrank the shogun in the imperial court hierarchy anyway.
The political maneuvering there is incredible. He found a loophole.
He was a master of loopholes.
But, how does a peasant command the loyalty of proud, aristocratic samurai lords who look down on his bird? I mean, Nobunaga forced loyalty through sheer terror. If you defied him, he burned your castle and executed your family.
Right. Nobunaga was the hammer.
Yeah. So Hideyoshi's approach had to be fundamentally different.
It was. The historical texts often describe him using the term Itotarashi.
Hitotarashi. What's the translation there?
A master manipulator of human hearts. A supreme charmer.
A charmer.
Hideyoshi understood human psychology intimately, likely because he had spent his early life having to read the moods of his superiors just to survive as a peasant.
Right. He had to be hyper-aware of what the powerful people wanted. I find this fascinating. When we say he charmed people, what are the actual mechanics of that? Because it's not just smiling and being polite, obviously.
No, it was a highly calculated empathy combined with overwhelming displays of power.
Okay, unpack that for me.
Hideyoshi understood that if you corner an enemy and threaten them with death, they will fight to the bitter end. And that costs you men and resources.
A cornered animal fights the hardest.
Exactly. Instead, he preferred to demonstrate absolute, undeniable dominance and then suddenly offer a generous, face-saving way out.
Like giving them a golden bridge to retreat across.
Precisely that concept. For example, during his campaigns, if he besieged a castle, he wouldn't just throw men at the walls.
Right.
He might use massive engineering projects like actually diverting a river to flood the entire fortress.
Flood the castle.
Yes, just to prove that resistance was physically impossible.
That is such a flex.
It was. But here's the kicker. Once the enemy was demoralized and soaking wet, instead of slaughtering them, he would offer the enemy commander a high-ranking place in his own administration.
Wow.
He'd throw lavish banquets, treat them with immense respect. He made it psychologically easier and far more profitable to submit to him than to fight him.
So he beats you, proves he's a god who can control rivers, and then invites you to dinner.
Pretty much.
He also did this with our third unifier, right? Tokugawa Ieyasu.
He did.
Yeah.
When they inevitably clashed after Nobunaga's death, they fought to a standstill.
Right.
Hideyoshi didn't want a decade-long war of attrition with Ieyasu, so he shifted gears.
What did he do?
He married his own half-sister to Ieyasu, and then he sent his own mother as a hostage to Ieyasu's camp.
Wait, he sent his own mother as a hostage?
Yes, it was a political masterstroke. By sending his mother, he was signaling absolute trust while simultaneously placing immense social pressure on Ieyasu.
Because if Ieyasu hurts the mother, he looks like the bad guy.
Exactly. It became culturally impossible for Ieyasu to continue a rebellion without looking like an absolute monster.
Wow.
So Ieyasu submitted, and Hideyoshi gained a very powerful ally without losing thousands of troops in battle.
That is just next-level manipulation. But I want to make sure we don't paint Hideyoshi as this benevolent, friendly guy.
Oh, he wasn't.
Because when he turned his attention to domestic policy, he looked at the social ladder he had just climbed, where a peasant could grab a sword and become a ruler, and he decided to permanently destroy that ladder.
He pulled the ladder up right behind him.
Exactly.
His domestic policies were brilliant administrative feats, but they were undeniably draconian.
What did he do?
In 1588, he initiated the sword hunt.
Sword hunt.
He issued decrees stating that peasants were strictly forbidden from owning swords, bows, spears, or firearms.
Wow. We mentioned earlier how the Iko-Iki peasant revolts were tearing the country apart. So if you want to secure the realm, disarming the populace is obviously step one.
Yes.
But the logistics of going village to village across all of Japan and confiscating weapons, how do you actually pull that off without sparking a massive rebellion right then and there?
He used a mix of intimidation and religious coercion.
Religious coercion.
Yeah. He announced that the metal from the confiscated weapons wouldn't be hoarded for his army. Oh, no.
Okay.
He said it would be melted down to build a massive statue of the great Buddha in Kyoto.
Oh, wow.
He framed the disarmament as an act of pious devotion that would guarantee the peasants a good harvest and peace in the afterlife.
That is deeply cynical and incredibly effective.
Very effective.
Yeah.
And it tied directly into his second massive social engineering project.
Which was?
Freezing the social classes.
Freezing them.
Yes. During the chaotic decades prior, a man could be a farmer in the spring, pick up a spear to fight as an ashigaru in the summer, and return to harvest crops in the fall.
Very fluid.
Hideyoshi outlawed this fluidity. He mandated a strict separation. If you were a samurai, you had to move out of the rural villages and live in the castle towns.
So they were separated from the land.
Entirely. They became dependent on stipends from their lord.
Okay.
And if you were a farmer, you were bound to your land and forbidden from carrying weapons. Period.
Think about the impact of that on a daily level. If you are a veteran ashigaru foot soldier, suddenly an official arrives with a ledger and forces you to make a permanent choice.
Right then and there.
Give up your weapons and go back to farming dirt forever, or leave your ancestral land, move to a crowded city, and become a full-time professional warrior.
It completely segregated the producers from the military force.
It's a monumental bureaucratic achievement, honestly.
It was. He even conducted a massive national land survey, measuring every field and assessing its rice yield so he could tax the farmers efficiently to pay the newly urbanized samurai.
Incredible. So he successfully transformed a chaotic, fluid society into a rigid, easily controllable hierarchy.
He did.
He reaches the pinnacle. He builds lavish, gold-leafed palaces, hosts grand tea ceremonies for thousands of people, and essentially controls the entire nation.
He was on top of the world.
But despite all of this psychological mastery and administrative control, Hideyoshi had a fatal flaw, a vulnerability he could not engineer his way out of.
He lacked a stable succession plan.
Right.
For all his wives and concubines, Hideyoshi struggled immensely to produce a biological heir, and as he aged, this became a full-blown crisis.
I can imagine.
To secure the lineage, he officially adopted his adult nephew, Toyotomi Hidetsugu,
Okay.
and he handed over the prestigious title of Kampaku to him, setting him up as the official successor.
Which makes sense. You need a strong adult successor in a world full of sharks.
Yes.
But then a biological miracle happens that ruins everything, right?
Yes. In 1593, when Hideyoshi is in his late 50s, one of his concubines gives birth to a biological son, Toyotomi Hideyori.
Oh, boy.
Suddenly, Hideyoshi's priorities shift entirely. He wants his own blood to rule.
And of course he does.
So the adult nephew, Hidetsugu, who already holds power, is now viewed as an existential threat to the infant son.
Imagine watching this unfold if you are one of Hideyoshi's generals.
It was terrifying. Hideyoshi's paranoia just takes over. He accuses his nephew of plotting treason.
Which he probably wasn't.
Probably not. He forces him to commit suicide.
Wow.
And then, in a display of brutality that shocked even the hardened warlords of the era, he orders the execution of Hidetoku's entire family.
His whole family.
Wives, children, retainers,
Yeah.
all publicly executed in Kyoto.
That is horrific.
It was a horrific purge,
Uh-huh.
and it deeply unsettled his own loyalists.
I mean, how could you ever trust him again?
Exactly. And it left the regime in an incredibly precarious position. By 1598, Hideyoshi's health is rapidly failing. He is dying.
And his sole heir, Hideyori, is a 5-year-old child.
Yes. Hideyoshi knows, from his own rise to power, exactly what happens to weak heirs when ambitious generals are in the room.
So he tries to build a bureaucratic cage to hold the sharks.
That's a great way to put it. He creates the Council of Five Elders on his deathbed.
The Council of Five Elders.
The Tairo. Hideyoshi selected the 5 wealthiest, most powerful daimyo in Japan, including Maeda Toshi, Usugi Kagekatsu, and Tokugawa Ieyasu.
Okay, so he gets the heavy hitters.
He made them sign blood oaths to protect the child. The structural mechanism was designed as a balance of power.
Right.
The idea was that these 5 titans would check each other's ambitions, governing the realm by committee, until young Hideyori came of age.
And we all know this, balancing 5 heavily armed, intensely ambitious warlords in a room together and asking them to peacefully babysit a throne.
It's a structural impossibility.
It's a recipe for absolute disaster. As soon as the central authority figure is gone, the factionalism is going to tear that committee apart.
Immediately.
Especially because one of those elders had spent his entire life waiting for exactly this moment. And that brings us to the final unifier.
Tokugawa Ieyasu.
Tokugawa Ieyasu.
To understand Ieyasu's mindset and the terrifying depths of his patience, we have to examine the trauma of his childhood.
Okay, tell me about his childhood.
He was born in 1543 in Mikawa Province.
Mm-hmm.
His birth name was Matsudara Takechio.
Okay.
His family was a minor regional power, and they were geographically cursed.
Cursed how?
They were wedged right between the aggressive Oda clan to the west and the massive Imagawa clan to the east.
Oh, so they are the meat in the sandwich.
Exactly.
I always compare Ieyasu's childhood to growing up in a mob family where you are constantly being offered up as human collateral.
That is remarkably accurate. When he was just 5 years old, his father tried to secure military support from the Imagawa clan by sending young Ieyasu to them as a political hostage.
5 years old.
Yes. But the convoy was intercepted.
Yeah.
And he was kidnapped by the rival Oda clan.
Man, so Oda Nobuhide, that's the father of Oda Nobunaga, he took the 5-year-old boy, sent a message to Ieyasu's father, and basically threatened to execute the child unless the Matsudara clan severed all ties with the Imagawa.
Right. Put yourself in the mind of a 5-year-old. Hearing his captors deliver that message.
Terrifying.
And then hearing his father's response, which was basically, go ahead and kill him.
Are you serious?
His death will just prove to the Imagawa how fully committed I am to our alliance.
Wow, what a father.
It is a staggering psychological burden for a child. Fortunately, Nobuhide didn't execute him. He kept the boy hostage for 3 years.
Okay.
Then, after Nobuhide's death, a young Oda Nobunaga negotiated a hostage exchange, and 9-year-old Ieyasu was handed over to the Imagawa clan.
So he just changes prisons.
Yes, where he remained a hostage until he was 14.
For the entire formative decade of his life, he was a prisoner, a pawn on someone else's board. You know, you don't survive that environment by throwing tantrums or demanding respect. You survive by learning to mask your emotions completely.
You have to.
You learn to read micro-expressions, to be universally agreeable, and to completely divorce your internal thoughts from your outward actions.
It forged a man capable of playing a decades-long game of chess.
And play it he did.
He did. When he finally returned to his home province and took control of his clan, he allied with Oda Nobunaga.
Right.
He fought Nobunaga's wars, guarded his eastern flank, and quietly built up his own fiercely loyal military administration.
And then when Nobunaga died and Hideyoshi took over, like we talked about, Ieyasu briefly fought him, recognized he couldn't win, and submitted.
He humbled himself before the peasant-turned ruler.
Right.
But his most brilliant patient maneuver happened in 1590.
Yes, the move to Edo. Let's talk about this.
Okay, so Hideyoshi is clearly still nervous about Ieyasu's power in his ancestral homeland of Mikawa.
Makes sense.
So he orders Ieyasu to pack up his entire domain, his samurai, his administration, everything, and relocate to the Kanto region in the Far East.
Which was what?
To an undeveloped, swampy fishing village called Edo.
Which is modern-day Tokyo, right?
Yes. But at the time, this was viewed as a massive demotion.
Like being sent to Siberia.
Exactly. To abandon the graves of your ancestors and march your army into newly conquered, unfamiliar, swampy territory far from the political center of Kyoto, it was incredibly dangerous.
Most warlords would have rebelled against such an order.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But Ieyasu accepted it with a polite bow.
Why? Why willingly march into the swamps?
Because it put hundreds of miles of mountains between him and Hideyoshi.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly. While Hideyoshi's inner circle in Kyoto was constantly entangled in political intrigue, Ieyasu was out in Edo, operating autonomously.
It's hillbilly.
He undertook massive infrastructure projects. He rerouted rivers to drain the swamps. He built a vast castle town and established a thriving local economy. He even minted his own coins.
So he turned a backwater into an economic powerhouse.
He did.
And the timing couldn't have been better for him.
No, it could not. Because in the 1590s, Hideyoshi launches two massive, disastrous invasions of Korea.
Oh, right. Hoping to conquer his way into Ming China.
Right, and the loyal Toyotomi lords are forced to send hundreds of thousands of troops across the sea. They are bleeding their treasuries dry and losing their best veteran commanders in a completely futile war.
But Ieyasu.
Ieyasu claimed he needed to stay in Edo to pacify the new territory and manage administrative issues.
Wow.
His troops didn't set foot on a boat. While his rivals weakened themselves, Ieyasu preserved his strength, hoarded his wealth, and expanded his military.
So when Hideyoshi finally dies in 1598 and that Council of Five Elders is activated, Ieyasu is sitting at the table as the undisputed heavyweight champion.
The balance of power was a complete fiction.
The board is set, and Ieyasu finally stops waiting and starts moving his pieces.
He immediately began violating the rules Hideyoshi had set.
What did he do?
He arranged political marriages between his children and powerful daimyo without consulting the other elders, just weaving a huge web of alliances.
Right. Which infuriates the Toyotomi loyalists.
Especially a deeply principled but inflexible bureaucrat named Ishida Mitsunari.
Ishida Mitsunari. Okay, tell me about him.
Mitsunari is fiercely loyal to the child heir, Hideyori. But he's a pimple pusher. He's an administrator. He doesn't command the respect of the battlefield veterans.
He's not a warrior.
Right. And Ieyasu sees this friction and masterfully exploits it, driving a wedge right through the heart of the Toyotomi coalition.
Wow.
Japan effectively splits into two massive camps.
Yep.
The Eastern Army, loyal to Tokugawa Ieyasu,
Okay.
and the Western Army, a coalition theoretically defending the Toyotomi heir, organized by Ishida Mitsunari.
So the political maneuvering rapidly escalates into open warfare.
Exactly. The armies mobilize, cities are besieged, and it all funnels toward a narrow strategic choke point in central Japan.
October 21st, 1600.
The Battle of Sekigahara.
The atmosphere that morning is legendary. Like we said at the beginning, it's a dense, blinding fog in a valley in Gifu Prefecture.
Very dramatic.
Let's look at the tactical layout because it is terrifying.
Okay, let's break it down.
Iyasu's Eastern Army marches into the valley with about 75,000 men. Mitsunari's Western Army is already there, waiting. They have roughly 120,000 men.
A massive numerical advantage for the West.
Huge. And Mitsunari has secured the high ground on the mountains surrounding the valley on three sides.
Which is textbook military strategy.
Right. Ieyasu is essentially walking into a giant U-shaped trap. If you just look at the map, the Western Army should completely annihilate the Eastern forces.
Militarily, Mitsunari had the perfect setup. He had the high ground, the numbers, everything.
Right.
But Ieyasu hadn't spent the previous months just polishing his armor. He had been writing letters.
The Hito Terashi stuff.
Exactly. He engaged in a massive, covert campaign of psychological warfare and diplomacy.
Behind the scenes.
He knew the Western Army was a fragile coalition of lords who, frankly, hated each other just as much as they hated him.
That makes sense.
Ieyasu offered them land, pardons, and wealth if they would hold their fire or switch sides on the actual day of the battle.
He was dismantling the enemy army from the inside before a single sword was drawn.
Exactly.
So when the fog finally burns off around 8 a.m., the carnage begins.
It does. The Eastern Army aggressively assaulted the Western lines, but the Western troops held firm. They fought hard.
Okay.
As the morning wore on, Ieyasu's forces were bogging down and taking heavy casualties. It wasn't looking good for the East.
So Mitsunari realizes it's the perfect moment to spring the trap.
He does. He lights a signal fire, ordering his massive reserves stationed on the mountainsides to charge down and crush Ieyasu's flanks.
And one of those key reserves on Mount Matsuo is commanded by a 22-year-old named Kobayakawa Hideaki.
Yes.
He's the nephew of the late Toyotomi Hideyoshi. His family owes everything to the Toyotomi name. He commands 15,000 fresh, heavily armed troops.
A huge force.
Mitsunari's signal fire goes up. The battle hangs in the balance. What does Hidaki do?
He freezes.
He freezes.
He does absolutely nothing.
Why?
Well, Ieyasu had secretly corresponded with Hidaki, promising him massive estates if he defected.
Oh.
But looking down at the chaos in the valley, the young commander was paralyzed by indecision. He wouldn't attack Ieyasu, but he wouldn't help Mitsunari either.
So he just sits there on the hill.
Just sits there.
Now, Ieyasu, who has demonstrated superhuman patience his entire life, is watching his army get chewed up in the valley while this kid just sits on the hill.
The tension must have been unbearable.
Unbearable. Finally, Iyasu's patience snaps. He makes a massive, incredibly aggressive gamble.
He orders a unit of his matchlock gunners to turn around and fire a volley up the mountain, directly into Kobayakawa Hideaki's position.
Shooting at the guy he wants to defect.
It was a terrifying psychological prompt. Ieyasu was essentially shouting, "Make a choice right now, or you are my enemy."
And the gambit worked, right?
It did. The primary historical accounts confirm that those warning shots jolted Hideaki into action.
Wow.
But instead of charging at Ieyasu, the 15,000 Kobayakawa troops swept down the mountain and slammed violently into the exposed flank of their own allies.
Wow. The betrayal causes a catastrophic chain reaction.
Total chaos.
Other lords in the Western Army, who were also secretly communicating with Ieyasu, they see Kobayakawa flip, and they immediately turn their weapons on their neighbors too.
The psychological shock of the men next to you suddenly stabbing you in the back, it causes the Western Army to completely disintegrate into panic.
It's over.
The sheer velocity of the collapse was unprecedented. Historians reference a letter written by Ieyasu himself to his ally Date Masamune shortly after the event, confirming that the decisive phase of the battle lasted a mere 2 hours.
2 hours.
From roughly 10:00 a.m. to noon.
160,000 men on the field. A century of civil war, resolved between breakfast and lunch.
It's just wild.
Was there any resistance at all?
Well, there were pockets of fierce resistance amidst the rout, the Shimazu clan, for instance.
What happened with them?
They found themselves entirely surrounded as their allies fled. But rather than surrender, their commander, Yoshihiro, executed one of the most famous fighting retreats in military history.
A fighting retreat.
He ordered his men to charge forward, breaking straight through the pursuing eastern lines.
Toward the enemy?
Yes, it was a suicide run to get their lord to safety. They started the morning with a full contingent and escaped the valley with barely 200 survivors, hounded the entire way by Ieyasu's vanguard.
Man. But the larger outcome was undeniable. It was a total, crushing victory for Tokugawa Ieyasu.
Complete victory.
In the aftermath, Ishida Mitsunari is hunted down, captured, and executed in Kyoto.
Right.
Ieyasu becomes the undisputed master of the country, and he immediately applies his administrative genius, right?
Yes. He starts confiscating the lands of the defeated Western lords and strategically redistributing them to his loyalists.
Ensuring that any potential enemies were isolated and completely surrounded by his allies.
Exactly. And in 1603, utilizing some highly creative genealogy to claim descent from the Minamoto clan.
Ah, the loophole.
Yep. Tokugawa Ieyasu was formally appointed shogun by the emperor.
He finally got the title.
He established the Tokugawa shogunate, operating out of his stronghold in Edo, officially cementing a government that would rule Japan in relative stability for over 250 years.
It is an epic saga of 3 incredibly different men facing the exact same problem of broken nation and solving it using entirely different mechanisms of power.
It really is. And, there is a famous, widely cited Japanese proverb that perfectly synthesizes their differing psychologies.
Oh, I've heard of this. It poses a simple hypothetical, right?
Yes. What do you do if a cuckoo bird refuses to sing?
I love this framing. Let's hear the approaches.
According to the proverb, Oda Nobunaga would say, "If the bird doesn't sing, I will kill it."
Right, which represents his reliance on absolute, terrifying force, his technological dominance, and his ruthless elimination of any obstacle.
A hammer.
The hammer. And Hideyoshi.
Toyotomi Hideyoshi would say, "If the bird doesn't sing, I will make it want to sing." This reflects his supreme charisma, his psychological manipulation, and his ability to engineer social structures like the sword hunt that force compliance by offering a golden bridge rather than the blade.
The Hitotorashi, the psychological architect.
Exactly.
And finally, the survivor, Tokugawa Ieyasu.
Ieyasu would simply say, "If the bird doesn't sing, I will wait for it to sing."
Wow.
Supreme patience. The ability to endure decades as a hostage, to willingly march his army into the swamps of Edo, to watch his rivals drain their strength in foreign wars, and to strike only when diplomacy and betrayal had guaranteed his victory before the battle even began.
That is profound.
It really is.
And, while we aren't commanding samurai armies today, there is a deep practical relevance here for anyone listening.
Absolutely.
When you are navigating complex office politics or facing a massive technological shift in your industry like Nobunaga adopting the matchlock and owning the supply chain, or if you are simply waiting for the right moment to make a major life change, these three unifiers offer a masterclass in the mechanisms of power, adaptability, and patience.
History is not just a sequence of impersonal dates and battles.
Yeah.
It is shaped by specific human psychologies reacting to crisis.
Exactly.
Nobunaga's violent force broke the old, decaying world.
Yeah.
Hideyoshi's brilliant administrative charm built the framework for a new one. And Iyasu's unshakable patience ensured that the new world would endure.
And endure it did. The Tokugawa shogunate established a peace that lasted 2.5 centuries.
Unprecedented peace.
But I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over.
Okay.
To maintain that perfect, uninterrupted peace and stability, the Tokugawa shogunate eventually made a radical calculation.
They did.
In the decades after Iyasu's death, they looked at the destabilizing influence of foreign trade and religion, and they enacted the Sengoku policy.
A closed country.
Right. They closed Japan off completely from the outside world. No foreigners allowed in, no Japanese citizens allowed out under penalty of death for over 200 years.
It's a huge trade-off.
They achieved the ultimate peace, but they bought it with absolute isolation. So if the cost of a perfectly stable, peaceful society is closing yourself off completely from a changing world, is that a price you would be willing to pay?